Guy de Maupassant, one of the most famous of all French writers, was born in 1850 and died in 1893. He is regarded as one of the fathers of the modern short story. The work I'm about to read, The Devil, was published in 1886. Before reading the story, I think I should explain the meaning of several of the words in it, as I suspect some listeners, especially younger ones, may be unfamiliar with them. Sabot, spelt S-A-B-O-T. This is a type of clog or heavy shoe worn by peasant people. Curé. This is a parish priest in France. A surplice, spelt S-U-R-P-L-I-C-E, is a white vestment worn by Christian clergy over their main garment, the cassock. A cassock, spelt C-A-S-S-O-C-K, is a full-length garment worn by some Christian clergy and also others with church roles, such as choir boys. Finally, biretta, spelt B-I-R-E-T-T-A. That is a stiff, square cap worn by Catholic clergy. The Devil, by Guy de Maupassant. Doctor and peasant stood facing each other, while the peasant's old mother, who lay in bed, dying, looked at the two men and listened to their conversation. She was calm, clear-headed, resigned. She knew that she was going to die, but she accepted the fact. She was 92. Her time was up. The July sun poured in through the open windows and doorway. Its burning rays fell upon the brown, uneven earthen floor which the sabots of 4 generations of peasants had trodden. Grilling puffs of wind brought in with them the odours of the fields, of grass, of wheat, of leaves burning under the noontide heat. The grasshoppers were shrilling themselves hoarse. The whole countryside was filled with their rapid chirping, not unlike the noise made by those wooden crickets which are sold to children at fairs. The doctor's voice became more emphatic. "Honoré, you cannot leave your mother by herself in the condition she is in. She may die at any moment." Honoré, very woebegone, replied, "All the same, I've got to get in my wheat. It has been lying on the ground too long already. It's just the weather for it. What do you think, mother?" The old woman, though on the point of death, was still in the fierce grip of Norman avarice. She nodded a silent assent. Her son must go and get in his wheat, and leave her to die by herself. The doctor stamped his foot with annoyance. "You're nothing but a brute, I tell you, and I won't allow you to do any such thing. Understand that. If you've got to get your wheat in today, you must send for the Rapet woman and make her look after your mother. I insist upon it. And if you don't do as I tell you, I'll let you die like a dog when it's your turn to fall sick. Remember that." Honoré, a tall, lean, slow-moving rustic, was tortured by conflicting emotions. He was afraid of the doctor. On the other hand, he had a violent passion for economy. He hesitated. He made calculations. Finally, he asked diffidently, "How much does the Rapet woman ask for nursing?" "How should I know?" the doctor said. "It depends on how long you keep her. Make your own arrangements with her, for goodness sake. But understand that I must have her here within the hour." I'm going," said Honoré, having made up his mind at last. "You can rest easy, doctor." The doctor gave a parting admonition. "Now you look out for yourself, my man. It's no joke when I get my back up, I tell you." Left alone with his mother, Honoré turned to her and said in a tone of resignation, "I'm going to fetch Mother Rapet, as that fellow insists on it. Keep easy till I come back." Then he followed the doctor out of the house. Mother Rapet was an old woman who did ironing. She also looked after people who were dying in the parish and its vicinity, and watched the bodies after death. The instant she had finished sewing up her customers in the sheet which they were never to cast off, she set about her other task of ironing sheets for the living. Her face was wrinkled like a last year's apple. She was spiteful, envious, and of an avarice which was hardly human. She was bent double, as if she had broken her back with eternally running the iron backwards and forwards over the linen. As for deathbeds, it was almost as if she had developed a hideous and morbid passion for them. Her only topics of conversation were the people whom she had seen die, and the different deathbeds at which she had been present. In great detail, and never varying by a single word, she would relate these occurrences, with the accuracy of a marksman describing each individual shot. When Honoré Bontemps entered her house, he found her mixing blue in a tub for the village girls' collarettes. "Well, how do you do, Mother Rapet?" he said. "Is everything all right with you?" Turning towards him, she replied, So-so. And you?" "Oh, I'm all right. It's my mother who is not doing so well." "Your mother?" "Yes, my mother." "What's wrong with your mother?" "She's going to turn up her toes. That's what's wrong with her." The old hag took her hands out of the water. The bluish, transparent drops trickled down to her fingertips and fell back again into the tub. With suddenly aroused interest, she exclaimed, "Is she as low as that?" "The doctor says she won't last out the afternoon." "Ah, then, she must be far gone." Honoré hesitated. He had a proposal to make, but he could hardly tackle the business without certain preambles. He searched for an opening, but finding none, came straight to the point. "How much will you take for looking after her till the end? We are far from well off, as you know. I can't so much as pay for a woman to do the work. That's just what is done for my mother, my poor mother. Too much bustle, too much work. She was 92, but she did the work of 10. They don't make women like that nowadays." Mother Rapet replied gravely, "I have 2 prices. For the rich, 2 francs a day and 3 francs a night. For the poor, 1 franc a day and 2 francs a night. I'll charge you 1 and 2. Honoré thought this over. He knew his mother well. He knew her tenacity, her vitality, her powers of resistance. She might last a whole week, whatever the doctor's opinion was. He replied firmly, "No, I'd rather you made me a fixed price to include the whole job. It's a risk whichever way you take it. The doctor says she's going to die immediately. If that happens, so much the better for you, so much the worse for me. On the other hand, if she lasts another day or even longer, so much the better for me, so much the worse for you." Mother Rapet looked at him in surprise. She had never yet treated a death on a time contract. Tempted by the speculative risk, she hesitated. Then a suspicion of trickery crossed her mind, and she replied, "I can't say until I've seen your mother." "Come and see her, then." She dried her hands and followed him forthwith. On the way to Honoré's house they were silent. She scuttled along, while he lengthened his stride, as if he had to cross a gutter at each step. Overcome by the heat, the cows were lying in the fields. As the old woman and the peasant passed by, the cattle raised their heads and lowed gently, as though asking for fresh grass. When they were close to their destination, Honoré Bontemps murmured, "Anyhow, suppose it's all over by this time." His unconscious desire that this should be the case was perceptible in the tone of his remark. The old woman, however, was not dead. She was lying on her back in her truckle bed, with her hands resting on the purple coverlet of printed calico. They were hideously thin and gnarled. doubled up with rheumatism, overwork, and the incessant tasks of well nigh a century. They reminded one of uncanny animals such as crabs. Mother Rapet went up to the bed and had a good look at the dying woman. She felt her pulse, passed a hand over her chest, listened to her breathing, asked her some questions in order to hear what her voice was like. After she had studied her again for a long time, she went outside, followed by Honoré. She had quite made up her mind that the old woman would not last till nightfall. "Well?" asked Honoré. "Well," replied Mother Rapet, "she will last 2 days, perhaps 3. My charge is 6 francs, inclusive." "6 francs! 6 francs!" he exclaimed. "Are you out of your wits? I give you my word she'll only last 5 or 6 hours, not a minute more." The dispute was conducted on both sides with extreme ferocity and at great length. However, the nurse threatened to leave him, and realizing that time was passing and that his wheat could not gather itself in without his assistance, he accepted her terms. "Very well, then, 6 francs, and that includes everything up to the lifting." "6 francs it is." He made off with great strides in the direction of his field, where the reaped wheat was lying under the oppressive harvest sun. Mother Rapet went back into Honoré's house. She had brought some work with her. She always worked industriously by the bedside of the dead or the dying, sometimes for herself, sometimes for the family of the patient, if they would pay her a little extra for the double job. Suddenly she addressed the dying woman. "Of course you've had your sacraments, Madame Bontemps?" Madame Bontemps shook her head. Mother Rapet, who was very pious, got up with alacrity. "Lord God, is it possible? I'll go and fetch the priest." She dashed off headlong to the curé's house, running so quickly that the small boys in the village square thought something serious had happened. The priest came along at once. In front of him went a choir boy ringing a bell to announce the passing of the host. The landscape brooded under the burning sun. Some men, who were working at a little distance, took off their wide-brimmed hats and waited until the white surplice of the curé was lost to sight behind a farm. Women, who were lifting the sheaves, straightened themselves and made the sign of the cross. A few black hens, terrified by the procession, fluttered along the ditches until they found some well-known gap in the hedge through which they disappeared. A colt, tethered to a meadow, took fright and started running round and round at the end of his tether, kicking up his heels. The choir boy in his red cassock trotted along, and the priest, who was wearing a biretta, followed him, murmuring prayers with his eyes on the ground. Last of all came Mother Rapet, head down, bent double, as if in the act of worship. She had clasped her hands as though she were in church. Honoré caught sight of them from a distance and asked, "Where is our curé going?" His labourer, who was more intelligent than his master, replied, "He is taking the sacrament to your mother, of course." Honoré expressed no astonishment. "Like enough," he said, and went on with his work. Mother Bontemps made her confession, received absolution, and communicated, and the priest took his departure, leaving the 2 women alone in the suffocating cottage. Mother Rapet presently began to take stock of her patient. She was wondering how long she would take in dying. Daylight was waning. The air became cooler. It entered the room in brisker puffs. The cheap coloured print that was fixed to the wall by 2 pins fluttered in the breeze. The little window curtains, once white but now yellow and fly-blown, had the appearance of wanting to fly away, of struggling to free themselves, like the old woman's soul. Mother Bontemps lay motionless, with her eyes open, seeming to await with indifference the death that was so imminent and yet so slow of coming. Her throat was a little constricted, and her breath was drawn with a slight whistling sound. Soon it would cease altogether. There would be one woman less in the world, and no one would miss her. Honoré came in at dusk. Approaching the bed, he saw that his mother was still alive. "How goes it?" he asked, exactly as he used to do when she was a little out of sorts. Then he sent Mother Rapet away, bidding her come without fail at 5 o'clock on the following morning. The old nurse did in fact return at daybreak. Honoré was having some soup before going out to his fields. He had prepared it himself. "Is your mother dead yet?" the nurse asked. With a sly twinkle in his eyes, he replied, "If anything, she is better." And off he went. Mother Rapet became uneasy. She went close up to the dying woman, who seemed in precisely the same state as the day before, listless, impassive, with her eyes open, and her hands doubled up on the coverlet. Mother Rapet saw that in this condition she might last for 2 days, 4 days, even a week. Her avaricious heart was wrung by apprehension, and she felt furiously angry with the sharper who had tricked her, and with this woman who refused to die. None the less she set about her work, but she kept a steady gaze fixed on the countenance of Mother Bontemps. Honoré came in for dinner. His face wore a satisfied, almost a bantering expression. Presently he went out again. He was certainly getting in his wheat under ideal conditions. Mother Rapet was losing her temper. Every moment that slipped past seemed now to her like stolen time, stolen money. She had a desire, a mad desire, to seize her by the throat, the tiresome, pig-headed, stubborn old thing. Just a little squeeze, and she would stop that short, quick breathing which was robbing her of her time and her money. She reflected, however, that this would be a risky thing to do. Other schemes occurred to her. She approached the dying woman and asked her, "Have you seen the devil yet?" "No," replied Mother Bontemps. The nurse then began to tell stories calculated to terrify the feeble intelligence of the expiring woman. She declared that the devil always appeared to the dying just a few minutes before the end. He had a broom in his hand, a 3-legged cooking pot on his head, and he uttered loud yells. Once you had seen him, you were through with everything. You had only a few moments to live. She gave the names of all the people to whom the devil had already appeared that year: Joséphine Loisel, Eulalie Ratier, Sophie Padagneau, Séraphine Grospierre. All this had its effect on Mother Bontemps. She grew nervous, fidgeted with her hands, and tried to turn her head so as to see into the far end of the room. Mother Rapet suddenly disappeared behind the curtains at the foot of the bed. From the wardrobe she took a sheet and wrapped herself in it. On her head she placed an inverted cooking pot with 3 short curved legs, which stood out exactly like 3 horns. She seized in her right hand a broom and in her left a tin bucket, which she threw up in the air, letting it fall with a horrible clatter. Then she climbed up on a chair, raised the curtains again, and showed herself to the patient. She gesticulated. She uttered shrill cries inside the iron pot which hid her face, and, like the devil in a Punch and Judy show, she shook her broom at the old peasant woman, now on the verge of death. In horror, with the expression of one crazed with fear, Mother Bontemps made a superhuman effort to scramble out of bed and run away. She managed to raise her shoulders and chest, but after this effort she fell back with a great sigh. All was over. With perfect tranquillity, Mother Rapet put all her properties back in their right places: the broom in the corner of the wardrobe, the sheet inside, the saucepan on the hearth, the tin bucket on the floor, and the chair against the wall. Then she proceeded to the actions which her profession demanded. She shut the wide, staring eyes of the dead woman. She placed a dish on the bed, filled it from the holy water basin, and dipped into it the sprig of box which was nailed above the chest of drawers. That she fell on her knees and set about a fervid repetition of the prayers for the dead. She knew them by heart, that being part of her trade. When Honoré came back from the harvest field at dusk, he found Mother Rapet on her knees. He entered forthwith into calculations. She had been 3 days and 1 night nursing his mother. That made a total of 5 francs, whereas he now had to give her 6. "I lost 1 franc over that," he reflected.